Hi friends, host Eric here, host Talking with Famous People, and I'd like tonight to make a video about a thinker and about thinkers in general, so to speak, named David Bren. And I'm making this video in part because I've had a lot of people talk to me about Jordan Peterson, who certainly is a person who has a lot of good things to say. And it occurs to me that I don't really talk very often about people who've influenced my ideation substantially and people whom I respect a lot as thinkers, and I don't have a lot of those people is part of the reason why, but I do have some. And one of them certainly is David Bren. David Bren is a science fiction writer and also a futurist, or whatever you want to call that. And I think he's got various credentials. He's got a PhD. He's a professor someplace. I don't know. If you concern yourself a lot with his legitimate authority, he's got plenty of it. He's a very well-sold writer of fiction, for one thing. I want to first just say that his core message is about, he's got a number of core messages. Like anybody who wants to ideate about significant conceptual matters in the status quo, in the new millennium, etc., he's going to cover a lot of ground. You can't help but cover a lot of ground because the further we get into the ideological clouds, or ideational clouds, I guess I should say, the further we get up there into those, the more we have a need for meta work, positioning things against a more easily understood and personalized frame of reference. But I want to talk mostly today about David Bren's thoughts on transparency, which are significant and worth attending to. Got some quotes I wanted to read. In a very general sense, what we are talking about in finding yet another way to accomplish the great miracle of the Western Enlightenment, which has been finding ways to ensure that competition among human beings is far more a generator of creativity and wealth than it is a provoker of chaos, cheating, and oppression. So what I like about that right off the bat is he's acknowledging that it can manifest as both. It provokes in people a sense of urgency to affect outcomes. Depending on the situation and the circumstance, the ecosystem in which that urgency is manifest, that can lead towards cheating, or it can lead towards more legitimate effort. It can, it's lots of different things it can lead to. And it's important to acknowledge that competition is not all good. Look across 4,000 years of human history, and it is easy to see that humanity's penchant for competition mostly had the opposite result. Freedom and open markets and fair courts were as rare as hen's teeth, in part because those who were powerful tended to cheat those who were too weak to complain. It took a whole new class of institutions for society to start fine-tuning human interactions, not by preaching that we should all be nice to each other all the time. That never worked at moderating the behavior of cheaters, but instead by making sure that rules of fair play had a chance to work. And that tool that made it work is called accountability. Next quote I want to read. I like the fact that he's focusing on accountability, because if we're talking about any sort of societal stuff, if we're talking about any policy kind of a thing, if we're not reinforcing mechanisms of accountability, or at the very least doing stuff that upholds those mechanisms, respects the integrity of those mechanisms, then we're doing vastly more harm than whatever the outcomes of our intended outcomes of our actions may be. The lazy caricature and transparency is the greatest of all accountability mechanisms. It's the engine of all accountability mechanisms. So that's why I'm reading this section next. The lazy caricature suggests that transparency will end privacy, making everyone walk around naked. It does take some mental flexibility to realize how a generally open society will be privacy friendly, but it was a generally open society that invented modern privacy. Look around today. The person who most capably defends your privacy is you. But to do that, you must be able to catch peeping toms and busybodies, and you cannot do that if they are shrouded in clouds of secrecy. Try the restaurant analogy. People who are nosy, leaning toward other diners in order to snoop, are caught by those other diners. Moreover, our culture deems such intrusion to be worse than anything that may be overheard. Now try setting up a restaurant where customer tables are separated by paper shoji screens, giving a surface illusion of greater privacy, but where peepers can press their ears against the screen and peer through little slits with impunity. Which approach better protects privacy? Which have people overwhelmingly chosen? We do not believe any group of men adequate enough or wise enough to operate without scrutiny or without criticism. We know that the only way to avoid error is to detect it. Is to be free to inquire. We know that in secrecy, error undetected will flourish and subvert. It's a quote from Robert Oppenheimer. Continuing, Bruce Schneider posed a thought experiment. Think of your existing power as the exponent in an equation that determines the value of information. The more power you have, the more additional power you derive from the new data. But this is precisely the age-old problem that Enlightenment civilization was invented to solve. Just take Bruce's sentence above and replace the words information and new data with secrets. Now it can be argued that both versions are true. But which version gives you a worse case of the creeps? The more power you have, the more additional power you derive. I see. An equation that determines the value of secrets. The more power you have, the more additional power you have to derive from those secrets. Now it can be argued that both versions are true, but which version gives you a worse case of the creeps? If civilization becomes a cloud of secrecy, as some are now trying to achieve, that's when elites can really exploit disparities of power. How have we fought this? Only one early Enlightenment trick was divide the elites, sick them on each other. Unions versus management, tort lawyers versus mega corporations, regulators versus moguls, activists versus non-governmental organizations against any power center you can name. NGOs, the boomer innovation, let citizens clump en masse, pooling influence to increase the common Schneider exponent, and use information advantageously. It's an Enlightenment method of great power and flexibility. Each person can find and join an NGO suited to any passion or interest. But the next step in people empowerment is even more impressive. Those burgeoning smart mobs Howard Ringgold and Werner Ving talk about, and now Clay Shirky, and here comes everybody, the power of organizing without organizations. It's agile, it's wired, every generation innovates or the Enlightenment dies. Yes, it's flawed. Elites keep rediscovering tricks of secret collusion. Still, if it's hopeless, how come we're having this conversation? Okay, so the important thing to remember is that anyone who claims a right to keep something secret is also claiming a right to deny knowledge to others. This sentence was really influential on me the first time I read it. I was like, oh. And it really helped me to frame a lot of different things differently. To realize the buttfuckery that people pull. Yeah, people pull a lot of buttfuckery. It's true. Not just with anal sex either. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. It's good stuff. I'm hanging out with an ESTP. It's a lady ESTP, so it's cool. Don't worry. She's not gonna go somehow seduce Kimberly.
Cheers.
All right. Male ESTP would be like, "What up, Kim?" I'd be like, "This is my knife, and your testicles will be going right there."
I believe you.
Threatened much, Eric?
I'm trying to be quiet over here.
Okay, so David Brent, he's a super smart guy, and well worth reading his essays and stuff. I don't know if he does have some stuff on YouTube. He's got a couple things on YouTube. He's got I think a TED Talk, maybe. I'm going to look it up right now. But I appreciate the fact that we all are influenced by different thinkers in significant ways. And one of my goals in general is to watch more content by other people doing ideational work in similar areas, and to try to celebrate that and also learn from it. In the spirit of that, I shared a guy I've already learned from rather than actually learn something new, but, you know, well intentioned. Thanks for watching Talking with Fitness, people, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.